Welcome back, Heat Seekers. Are you ready to win your waiver wire and go into week 9? Well, we're here to help you. These are the IDP waiver wires you probably need to target this week. With that being said, let's get into the linebackers. Craig, who do we want to talk about?
First guy is coming off a bye. It's Josh Bynes of the Baltimore Ravens. Past 2 weeks before their bye, he had taken over as the man in the middle for the Ravens. They'd moved Patrick Queen to the weak side, which does not bode well for Queen, and his production has proven that this season anyway. Bynes led the linebackers with a 77 and 73% snap share those 2 weeks and had at least six combined tackles. He had 4 solos, 2 assists 1 week, and then 5 and 1 the next week with tackle for a loss, 2 thrown in there. So he's being the main guy in the middle. He's had to stabilize that linebacker group, as their head coach put it, and I'm expecting that to continue as they're still trying to win that division here.
Yeah, and he's a veteran leader. Bynes has been doing it for feels like a while now.
I think. Yeah,
he's been on quite a few teams over the years, and he's producing pretty well. When you look over the last 2 weeks, he's getting most likely double-digit points each week, depending on obviously your scoring format. But definitely a guy to look out for if you need some linebacker help with all the things that have been happening recently.
Yeah, moving on. We got Ernest Jones here next, and we had spoken about him in last week, and it was worth repeating again here, basically, because he led the sort of traditional linebackers, non-edge type guys with snaps. He had a 92% snap share, 7 solos, 2 assists, tackle for a loss, half a sack, an interception, and a pass deflection. I know, the INTs and the sacks may not be there with how they have that defense set up. Especially with the news, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, Von Miller was traded to the Rams, so that'll be interesting to see how he and Floyd play off each other. The edge guys, once Miller's healthy, but it looks like Jones is going to be the main guy. He had around 25% more snaps than Troy Reeder, who we thought was going to be the veteran guy there for a couple weeks anyway, and Reeder certainly on the field around like 66% of the time, but Jones was the guy, and I think they are clearly making a move for now, not only with the Miller trade, but I think with Jones and the athleticism and his abilities in that middle linebacker spot.
Yeah, if you started him, you saw big dividends, and it's going to keep going because they're like the kid, they're high on the kid, and he produced when given an opportunity. And when you look at what's coming up with the Titans and then the 49ers before a bye week, I easily see him still give you probably not nearly as high production, but definitely double-digit type weeks over the next few weeks, especially with some of these additions like Von Miller and such. So definitely a good pickup is, again, thumbs up from me.
Next guy here, he's already up. Linebacker, top 25 linebacker, at least with the Roto Heat scoring, which again, you can find a video on this site, and you're supposed to find the article on our website. But he isn't really one of those big name guys. He's only rostered around 4% Yahoo and 0% on Sleeper. It's Kazir White, the Chargers. He's led them for the year with snap share around 76%. He's played in every game and has had at least 4 combined tackles in every game. I think you can actually play for most of the year here if you're looking for someone, given how he's shown out this year and just the weird fantasy year that we're having on the IDP side of it. But they play the Eagles in week 9, who this year haven't been great in terms of points allowed to opposing linebackers. If you look at how the Eagles ran the ball this past week, and then knowing that the Chargers have just been vulnerable to the run this season, I think it's another matchup where the Eagles probably try to take advantage of that with running the ball more, and that's going to lead to more potential tackles for White, who, again, he's already having a decent year, but I think he's a really good play this week.
Yeah, and if you look at what he's done so far in the projection for the full season, he's a very quality starter that you can trust on a weekly basis. Definitely a guy who's been under the radar, but should still give you a solid tackle floor, if nothing else, depending on your league scoring, obviously. So plug him in and be happy.
Last 2 are plays off of that Von Miller trade as well. So we have Malik Reed and Baron Browning. Malik Reed's been there a couple of years. It's an outside linebacker for the Broncos, and Browning has been playing there for the most part when he's played, which hasn't been much this year. He had a 26% snap share 1 week before this past week, which was his highest. This past week, he hit 97%. He had 5 solos, 3 assists, and a tackle for a loss. Looks like they're going to be trying him more so on that outside as opposed to the inside. They're going to have a need there with Chubb, Hurt, and Miller gone. Reed has played decently this year. Not a big tackle guy. He's more of a big play guy. He has 11 solos and 11 assists, 2 tackles for a loss, 4 sacks. some forced fumbles, a pass deflection, but he's sitting around an 85% snap share. So he's already been on the field a lot with Chubb. And it looks like Browning is going to be the guy they're going to be giving that first real opportunity to replace Von Miller. So again, you might want to pick him up and stash him, see how it goes. Dynasty leagues, he may not be available. That's Browning, just because he was a third-round pick out of a big-name college, Ohio State, this year. But both of them are, again, pretty much available in most leagues.
Yeah, Browning would be, Reed feels safer, but Browning feels like the guy that I would probably target if I was looking to add one for my team, just because at least what we saw in the first game, his first game against Washington was 5 tackles, a tackle for loss, 3 assists. It seems like the team was trying to get him involved, and he returned a decent dividend against Washington. I don't know if he can keep that up as a young guy trying to develop. Reed feels safer for me, but neither one of them you really should be able to get a nice production out of with Miller gone.
Yep.
All right, so moving on to DBs. Who we got?
First one's a contingent play, but he's played well for the Eagles the past 2 weeks. It's Marcus Epps, safety filling in for Anthony Harris. Hadn't done a whole lot this year, so we'll see maybe if Harris comes back to keep Epps there to see how things go. He's had 100% snap share the past 2 weeks with Harris out. He had 5 solos, 6 assists 1 week, and then this past week, 7 solos, 2 assists, and a pass deflection. It's going to be playing against the Chargers, and if you paid attention again to what we were talking about previously, the potential for the Chargers just trying to run the ball, and then they try to have the big plays downfield. He's going to have opportunities. The Eagles don't have a bye week until week 14, so he's potentially someone, if Harris is going to be out, you're going to be able to play for a while. And again, he's virtually unrostered right now, so if you need someone to fill in, he looks like a good bet. Just pay attention to Harris's status.
Yeah, an interesting late round kid. I think he was from Wyoming, if I remember correctly, but he's been in the league a couple of years now. He looks pretty good on the field. And unfortunately, I had to watch that disastrous Eagles-Lions game on Halloween, and it scared me to death. But he looked good on the field. It looks like he's got the defense pretty well figured out and is doing his assignments pretty well from everything I could see, and getting himself in a good position to get some tackles. And obviously, we haven't seen any INTs or anything, but even if he's just a safe floor for tackles, then hey, that's startable in most leagues.
Yep. Next guy is someone that we talked about a little bit that had grown on me towards the end of the draft process, and then where he went, he just got talked up quite a bit. This preseason, he hasn't really gotten a whole lot of playing time until now, but Talanoa Hufanga for the 49ers. He started for the injured Jaquiski Tart, who's going to be out at least another 2 weeks. He was on the IR. 4 solos, an assist, and 1 tackle for a loss. In a bad matchup, the Bears don't give a whole lot of points to opposing safeties this year. The Cardinals, who is their next opponent, don't either, but it's better than the Bears. And he's a guy, again, that really impressed not only the coaching staff in preseason, but the veterans on the team, like Josh Norman, Fred Warner, had great things to say about his play and how smart he was being lined up where he should be and doing what he needed to be. They also had their bye week already back in week 6, so he's not going to be someone you have to drop. If he starts playing well for you, you can hold on to see what happens. And he's just in a good situation with that playing time, and he's impressing, and it's a decent stat line for a rookie in his first real start.
Yeah, well, is it 4 tackles, the TFL, and an assist? That's nothing to get upset about there for a rookie in game 1. And the way this defense has been looking, I don't know what to expect. So this feels like one of those pickups. If he continues to put on a good performance, why not? Especially with safety being such a nice position to try to stash some guys at in IDP, I would absolutely take a shot on him if I had the roster space and see what happens.
Yeah, the 49ers have a really banged up linebacking core. They were playing another safety at linebacker basically this past week. So there's going to be tackles to be had against the Cardinals, who are probably going to have a real good chance to put up points after that poor week against the Packers.
Yeah, absolutely. Who's our corner?
Yeah, this one, again, we like to pick a corner each week, and most of the time these corners are available. Bryce Hall is, I think, a guy that we had talked about in a previous week, but he's doing great this year. He leads all the Jets cornerbacks with a 98% snap share on the year. They play the Colts on a short week. Colts, of course, had that very interesting ending to their high-scoring game against the Titans this past week, but the Colts give up the most points to opposing cornerbacks on the year. Hall has had at least 3 combined tackles and a pass deflection each week from week 2 on. And he's a top, 25 cornerback on the year. We know that the Jets like to give up points, so fire him up if you need a cornerback. And I think he could also have potential to be viable in DB leagues if you're having issues with buys and you need flex defensive back or something.
Yeah, and when you look at just pulling up his stats over the first 8 weeks, it looks like he gives you a decent floor for tackles, gives you a decent opportunity for pass deflections. And depending on how your league scores all these different pieces of the stat line, it could be a really nice play going forward. They've already gotten through their bye week, and they have some Bills in week 10 as a tough matchup, but otherwise Dolphins, Texans, Eagles, Saints. And those are all matchups where a corner could really do pretty well, all things considered. So definitely an interesting pickup for sure. And then moving on to our defensive lineman.
We're going to mention, this is a few weeks ago we talked about him, but he's still not owned nearly as much as he should be. Trey Hendrickson, it's around 2% on Sleeper, 10% on Yahoo. He's only had 2 weeks this season, week 1 and week 4, without a sack. That's on a 71% snap share. And we know those defensive ends generally, those big plays are how you get your points out of them. And this next week brings up the Browns, whose offensive line is having all sorts of problems. And they gave up a ton of pressure this past week to Pittsburgh with Mayfield getting hit, and that's not going to change whether it's Keenum or Mayfield this coming week. They do have their bye coming up in week 10, so after this week, you'd have to make that decision. And again, deeper leagues, you're probably not available, but in your standard 2 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, 2 DBs for more of a beginner type league, he's probably still out there based on those numbers. And I think he's a really good ad based on how he's been doing.
Look at that. 1 sack, 1 sack, 1 sack, 2 sacks. No sacks against the Jaguars. Surprising. 1 sack, 1.5 sacks. I mean, Hendrickson's a really sneaky ad if you're looking for somebody that is going to give you some pretty safe production. Sacks are tough sometimes to come by on a regular basis, but he's just been producing well in this Cincy defense. So fire it up if he's available. Go after him.
Next one is a big name from draft years ago that just hasn't done a whole lot. Eric Armstead of the 49ers. He's basically free in all leagues at this point. And there's good reason for that. He has 8 solos, 10 assists, 2 tackles for a loss, and a sack on the year. You'd think, wow, he's not playing a whole lot, but no, he's out there for 72% of the snaps for the 49ers. This is more of a 1-week play, again, if you need help, because the Cardinals give up the second most points to opposing defensive ends. It's a big matchup for the division where the 49ers are trying to stay in the thick of things. Cardinals came off of their first loss. Cardinals already had their bye week. If you decide for some reason that you would want to keep them, I don't think you probably do. It's more of a matchup-based play, but I do think it's a good spot for a guy that hasn't been performing to have some opportunity with Nick Bosa on the other side.
Yeah, and be mindful, though. This feels, of all of our IDP waivers so far, this feels more boom or bust. Looking at his last matchup against the Cardinals, didn't give you much to go by. I think he had 2 assists just a few weeks back in week 5. So be mindful, but he has been playing better as of recently. So maybe this is one of those where he's on the field enough, the opportunity's there. Things have been looking a little better the last few weeks for him, so maybe there's something there to go on.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where if you're looking at just the top scoring guys for defensive linemen, and then much less the waiver wire, which is even more sparse, it's hard to find production, anything consistent, period, this year. So playing time opportunities, sometimes that's what you got to be looking at here and hoping if you're just having to fill in where there's no one on your roster you want to or able to play.
Absolutely. And we got a D tackle. This one you haven't really seen much of all year because I think he was suspended, right?
Yeah, he suspended the first 6 games of the season. David Anamata for the New Orleans Saints. He had his first game back, and he only had a fumble recovery on a 44% snap share. But they need something besides Cameron Jordan, who hasn't done a whole lot. He's been really focused on for that defensive line here this year. And Saints already had their bye week, which was good. He's going to be virtually free because people have forgotten about him with having been out for those first 6 games. You should probably know his name if you've been playing IDP for at least a year, because last year he was a top 10 interior lineman with how well he played on that team. So he has a good year under his belt. He's coming back. He's got his feet under him with a 44% snap share. And the Falcons give up the most points to opposing defensive tackles. So I think he's in a great spot to just show up and start having a good week to try to pick up where he left off last year.
Well, and he's one of those guys, yeah, in 2020, I mean, he did well. 20 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 24 assists, an interception, 6.5 sacks, 2 pass deflections. With significant playing time came a really nice production throughout the season. So definitely one of those guys that, especially if you're in a defensive tackle specifically, you want to target a player like this, because this could be, now that he's back in game form and getting on the field regularly, this could be a big one. Could be really helpful as you push for a playoff. So that's it, folks. Those are IDP waivers for the week. The Kraig has spoken. We have helped you. If you need anything else, drop a comment below, hit the like button. We'll see you guys later.